things.
It is so cool. I mean, it really
Yeah.
is. And your commentary on it, for those listening, it is really worth going to the website and looking at the blocks because it's really cool. And just the time you took to talk about each block is really, really interesting. So, yeah, it was really
Each
cool.
maker kind of sent in a comment about the experience of making the block, right? And so
Yeah,
it's titillating for some. It's also cathartic for some. Some feel really like thought they were working through some rage when they made the
that's
block.
really
And
cool.
I think that's more important, right? For
Yeah,
me, I'm more of a process person than a product person. And so
interesting.
um, I think I really kind of got into that side of the things.
That's really
So
cool.
yeah,
All
and
right.
that quilt showed at a big quilt show at QuiltCon, the first QuiltCon.
Yeah,
So it's definitely had quite a few eyeballs on it.
that's
So
really interesting. And what was the response at QuiltCon to it?
um, yeah, well, so they hung it prominently. It was not hidden in a back corner or anything. So and at that time, no one knew me by my face, and so I turned my name tag over and I just lurked next to it. So there were people, it was hung next to a quilt that said F cancer
Oh, interesting.
with the F word fully
Yeah,
spelled out. And,
yeah.
and so it was actually more interesting to hear people having contrasting opinions about which one was acceptable, right?
Interesting.
And
That's
so had
weird.
the word
Interesting.
cancer appeared on my quilt, it would have
Right.
been
That's really interesting. And then you've got other ones that are more positive about using that word.
yeah.
And I thought that was really interesting too. That word, exploring that word as what it in all of its different varieties, and that the conversation with the quilt seemed you start to think about the word differently by looking at your quilts.
Right.
Yeah, super interesting. Okay, so we were talking about Black Lives Matter. How did that shift what you were doing with quilting?
Yeah. So I still want to make quilts that mean something to me. And also, I'm still using them as my meditation after work, right? Um, and so Michael Brown, who was shot in Ferguson, Missouri by a police officer for the alleged crime of stealing some cigarillos and walking down the middle of a street. Like,
Mm-hmm.
so those are the basics of what he was accused of. I, you know, you just graduated high school, about to start college, just you think about all the hope that this young man had. And it was the first one in, sort of recent memory that started started a riot, and then there was a significant media presence. And so I don't have cable, so I don't watch a lot of news. I listen on the radio, and so a lot of stuff is just processed through my head, and I can get really stuck in a corner just thinking about things over and over again. And so for that one, I made a quilt that's called Elegy for Mike, and it's a all black log cabin quilt with stylized bullet holes in it.
It's like when you, so it's really pretty. I had mentioned that's on my list of like to ask you about, but then
Mhm.
when you realize what it is, it's unbelievable. Like what you did was so amazing. It's
Oh, thanks.
incredible, right?
Hmm.
Yeah,
And yeah, and so that kind of got me, and it's quilted within an inch of its life. So even the black background is super densely quilted in black thread.
interesting.
So, and with every stitch, like I was not watching TV. I wasn't listening to music. It was silent in my house as I was stitching that. And it
Wow,
was just me processing, trying to figure out what's going on in the world, right?
that's really interesting. How did you make the swirls? Because they're like circles. It's so beautiful and haunting and important. How
Mhm.
did you make the pink and the bullet holes?
So they're all embroidered in um, just different, I had probably like 10 or 12 different kinds of threads,
Yeah.
and embroidered in lots of different stitches in different densities and different right. unfortunately, I decided I needed to Google a bullet hole and then
Oh,
study
goodness.
photographs of bullet
Right.
holes. And they don't all look the same. And so I definitely wanted to reflect that. And
That's really
there's
interesting.
different kind of entry pathways. So you can see sort of a ricochet in one of them. Um,
And
yeah.
did you do the embroidery after you did the quilting, or was it on the quilt top and then do you see it on the back? Is one of my question is, is the
Yeah.
embroidery on the back as well?
You can see some of it, right? So
Yeah,
some of it are quilting stitches and some of it's just embroidery on the top. But I
that's
did
really
it all
interesting.
after layering. So,
Wow, that's just really cool. I mean,
mhm.
haunting and cool. All right, so is that really the moment? Like you've been doing word quilts. I mean, you had been also doing self portraits. Did that happen before or after that?
So the self-portraits are completely motivated by that I wanted to make my Trayvon Martin quilt. And so
Ah,
I knew that I wanted to reflect on the uh, politics of fashion of the hoodie because in the aftermath, um, who knows, somebody said that if he hadn't been wearing a hoodie,
yeah,
he wouldn't have been shot, right? And
right.
so I wanted to actually play more with that, right? So my goal is always that you can still interact with my work, even if you don't know the specifics of the inciting incident,
Yeah,
right? So for me, you don't have to know about the Trayvon case to interact with that quilt because it's fully illustrating this issue of different perspectives, different where you put your light source will change how you view a person,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so, but if you know about Trayvon, then it has deeper meaning,
That's
right?
really cool. Your
And
stuff
so
is
the
just
yes,
so cool.
oh,
It's
thank you.
unbelievable.
So the self portrait series was that I needed to build the skills to be able to make that quilt.
Yeah. And how are you making those? How are you is that applique? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah, it's raw edge applique. Yeah.
Wow. And are you taking a photograph or are you just doing it? How are you doing that?
Uh-huh. They are two-tone photos that I do by having a super intense light source that will only then therefore you're only going to pick up one layer. So you're not going to pick up, it's not going to be a 3D picture, it'll be a 2D layering effect if
Wow.
your light source is intense enough, right? And so, yeah, that's what it is. And so, um, obviously, I take like 100 pictures and then I pick the best layer.
Wow. It's
um,
just incredible. It's incredible.
yeah. So then, that led me to just explore the self portrait for a moment. So the self portrait doesn't, what is the self portrait even? Like
Yeah.
that's questioning things. And so then,
Right. You're back
what
to
can
the words that you did earlier of sort of identifying who you are
Mhm.
because each picture sort of tells you who you are in a little bit different way, right?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah. Wow. This is just, you're so insanely cool. All right. So, oh my gosh, I can like barely breathe when I look at your work, which is like what's supposed to happen, I think, with art and quilts.
Hmm.
So
And
tell,
sorry, I can't pass up that connects to another of my Black Lives Matter
yeah,
quotes.
tell
Uh,
me. I
right.
can't
So,
breathe, right? I can't
yeah,
breathe.
yeah,
Yeah,
for
that's
Eric
what your
Garner.
work's supposed to do is make
Yeah.
people feel like they cannot breathe because they're overwhelmed by the work, right?
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah. All right, so
Yeah.
tell us about this one.
So Ray Eric Garner, for the alleged crime of buying a pack of cigarettes, opening it up, and then selling them one by one in violation of the tax code of New York.
Awesome.
Um, he was stopped on a street corner in Staten Island and subdued with a chokehold and killed. He was a very big man with some breathing problems, asthma, and other heart problems. And so it was a pretty foregone conclusion that a chokehold might take him out.
Yeah,
And his final words were, I
I
can't
can't breathe.
breathe, over and over again. So I unfortunately decided to watch one of the YouTube videos of his last moments.
It's
And
brutal. It's
you
super
can
brutal,
just hear
right?
him
Yeah.
pleading for his life by saying, I can't breathe, I can't breathe, I can't breathe. And I heard it at least 9 times in the video I watched. There are some who say he said it more. And so I never thought that this quilt was going to see the light of day because I was just making those words so that I could take a moment out to try to, first of all, feel what it's like to labor over those words,
Yeah.
right? And they're so emblematic of what I was feeling about what was going on in the nation.
Yeah.
And this was long before it was chosen as the motto for Black Lives Matter movement.
Yeah.
This and I made those words, and then the words just sort of sat there in a stack because it had had the sort of psychological effect that I needed. And so I put them aside, and then later I came back and made the surrounding black area. And so the words are in white on a black background, fading into sort of a blue to sort of represent what it feels like to drown,
Wow.
which
That's really amazing.
that's my
That's really
association
amazing.
with him sort of losing his breath.
Yeah.
And to me, it looks like graffiti kind of scrawled on a wall
Yeah.
in the dark, And yeah, so that's that quilt.
And then with the quilt, you chose, is that a log? What are you doing with the other part of the quilt? And it's got little bits of flecks of blue and white. Like tell me about the rest of the quilt because it's really interesting.
So, yeah, the rest of the quilt is improvisational piecing. Some of it is, the basic underlying structure is probably a log cabin, but they're not all strictly log cabins. And so it's dense patchwork, so it's not a lot of big chunks of material. I tend to use a lot of smaller piecing, but it's mainly log cabiny, but all different black fabrics.
Yeah.
So, and they're mainly like Civil War fabrics. So, if we want to go deeper, you have to think about that when you're making something out of cotton,
right?
You're making a commentary about slavery and race in America. Yeah, and then that there's Civil War prints kind of adds that next.
It's quite
layer.
remarkable. It's so cool.
Yeah.
So amazing. See, I told you we'll get to like the first question. So tell me about the other. So you have other pieces that are just incredible. The Autumn is Wistful is so, and then In Shadows, and the Get Woke. Tell me about the pieces now that you're doing in 2017 and 2018.
Yeah. So, right. So if I wanted to keep making Black Lives Matter quilts, I could, right? There's an unending list of cases, and I certainly hope to turn to the cases of women who've been facing injustices,
yeah.
Who are in some sense we don't shine a light on them. And so that is one of my intentions in the future. And so then I decided to kind of turn to more personal topics.
Yeah.
And then there's also the current political environment.
Right.
And so I'm never just making one quilt. And so, the two kind of dominating things right now are what is it about my own identity that I want to express through my quilts.
Right.
And so that's how we get to Autumn is Wistful. And then there's Get Woke, which is about what's going on right now. And Get Woke is more, it's a reverse applique quilt that just sort of says "Rise Up, Resist" all over it.
Yeah.
It's my version of a protest poster.
Yeah.
So
right. The protest quilting. That is all about, so is your Black Lives Matter stuff, but protest quilting in the wake of Trump is getting more attention.
Yeah. But I never want to make a Trump quilt. So that's another thing is, again, because I don't want my work to be tied to a specific incident, right? I could make a quilt for every tweet.
Right. Right.
And I don't want to get in that business because then your work becomes stale if people don't remember that joke, right? How many tweets have we forgotten by this point anyway?
Right. Exactly.
So I'm definitely doing things with much broader strokes. And so Rise Up Resist is sort of more of a general statement about
it's really cool.
And certainly for me, it's not specific to this moment, right? the nation's rather unjust to my people all the time. So,
Right. All the
um,
time. That's right.
yeah,